former British Army Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. He says put the soldiers back in charge of recruitment, whilst former Lieutenant Colonel and former Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood, thinks we need to prepare our nation from growing threats. Tobias, let's start with you. Do you think that national service is a good idea?
Well, the fact that we're even debating this question, that you actually put this on your programme, that's the real question that we need to answer. Why is there even a need to discuss this? And that's because, as you implied, there are some very real threats that are gathering. A new anti-West axis is developing. It's determined to reshape our world order. There's an unmistakable sense of growing self-confidence amongst these authoritarian regimes. We've seen that with Putin now getting re-elected for the 5th time. They're mutually exchanging military equipment. They're politically supporting each other as well, and much, much more. This is a new era of insecurity that we are woefully unprepared for. So the fact that we're having this debate even about conscription, I think, is actually healthy. Not that that perhaps is the answer, but to actually challenge the mindset of just how dangerous our world is becoming. We've had it pretty easy for the last 3 decades, and it's going to get very, very bumpy indeed. That's the bigger question I'm posing there. How do we make sure we defend Britain's interests and also continue to play a leadership role on the international stage as we've done in the past?
I completely agree with you. And Hamish, if I could put that to you, I've talked with Tobias and Nick. You know, there are real threats. There is this axis. People will accuse me. They'll say, oh, you're warmongering. It's not going to happen. No, we're not. National conscription's another thing completely. I mean, the reason we're even having this debate, right? Yes, there are real threats, and we are completely and utterly underprepared. I'm old-fashioned, but to me, Great Britain always had an army and a navy and an air force. We've got nothing, man. And is this not another reminder that we should be spending more on defence because the world is getting scarier by the minute?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, absolutely it is. I agree with Tobias and what you're saying. We absolutely need to plan for conscription because, you know, I agree. You know, we have never been closer to war in Europe than really since 1939, and we need to prepare for it. My gripe is actually, at the moment, there are thousands of young men and women who want to join the army, who can't because of poor administration and the way that recruitment is done at the moment. So the most immediate problem is to get our ranks full of the top men and women in this country who are desperate to join the army. And then we need to build an army that is a conventional deterrent. I think Putin looks over the water at us now, and you know, it's not a consideration at all. We've always, you know, we punch above our weight, pound for pound. Our men and women are the best in the world. But at the moment, our army is so small that apart from very small sort of operations, it can't do very much. And if Ukraine does not prevail, and the Russians, I don't think anybody who studies this believes that they'll stop in Ukraine, we will be fighting the Russians in Europe, and we'll need our regular man.
So can I...
First echelon, and then the conscripts.
Can I jump in? Because I said that this morning, and Tobias, I put this to you, and I don't know the guy's name now, no disrespect, but he said to me, no. Putin's not going anywhere outside Ukraine. He looks at the size of NATO, and I went, but hold on a minute. Sweden and Finland have just joined up, which tells me there's a concern. That's the first point I wanted to ask you about, Tobias. The second is, let's talk about the concept of national conscription, right? We've talked about GDP and defence. I used to say, just make all these people join the army. That's not good enough. The administrative problem's one thing. These need to be trained people. They can't just be people that are dragged off the streets. Would the British Army want just hordes of people that don't want to be in it? Would that work?
So 2 questions there. Firstly, on Putin. Yes, he's now the most powerful leader in Europe. He's silenced all opposition in his own country, fully in control of his own media as well. The old Communist Party structure that used to contain Russian leaders is gone. He's now more dangerous than Stalin, but he wants to emulate Stalin. He wants to expand his influence over Eastern Europe. That doesn't necessarily mean military might attacking NATO. What it means is undermining our economies across Europe. That's what he's going to do. But also there's a lot of Europe that's not in NATO. And that's exactly where Putin will aim to next. Look how our economy in the UK was impacted by those grain ships unable to get out of Odessa. Food prices jumped here by about 19%. It's all interconnected because of globalization. Oil and gas prices as well. And don't forget what's also going on, to make this really clear. You've got Iran doing things in the Middle East, disturbing the security of the Middle East. You've got China doing things in the Far East as well. There's a widened complexity of issues which the West is finding difficulties to come to terms with. But your other question about capabilities, you're absolutely right. We've got the most professional armed force in the world. They volunteer to come forward, and that perhaps is the hesitance about getting, signing people up because they won't want to be there. What I would say, though, is that there are models across Europe. Finland is by far the best, where people rotate through the reserves and the regulars as well, but then sign up for life, essentially. Go back every year for a couple weeks top-up training. So if there's a necessity to suddenly upgrade and mobilize a wider armed force, you've got that latent capability embedded in your society. We don't have that here right now.
And Hamish, do you think we would get anywhere near the same numbers that we used to when it comes to conscription? Because I think younger people nowadays, certainly my generation, they perhaps don't feel as much of a connection to being British, or they certainly feel they have a more globalist mindset and are far more pacifist than older generations. So it'd be quite difficult to find willing participants on that larger scale.
Yeah, as members of parliament, we sometimes get asked, what would be your single bit of legislation that you might want to put through? Mine actually is in a way to bring back some form of national service. That doesn't necessarily mean the Army, Air Force or Navy. It means doing something for your nation after school, before university, before you get a job. It could be working for the Forestry Commission, working for the ambulance service, doing something for the nation to underline that sense of patriotism, to learn more about your country, to do something.
Tobias, sorry, because I just absolutely take that point. Just want to get Hamish's response that quickly, guys. I always want more time. What's your response to that, Hamish?
Well, I think there are two things. First of all, what we can't do is have the current military fixated by getting all these conscripts up to speed. That would completely stymie our current military, but we need to plan for it. And the second thing, your point that, young kids, young people these days are pacifists and all the rest of that's great. But there's war in Europe. Absolutely. And unfortunately, we can't have the luxury to do nothing. Unfortunately, like our forebears, we're going to have to get up and fight if required. That is life, unfortunately.
And that, gentlemen, and I get where Nick's coming from. It is a different generation. But try explaining to them if Putin does step outside Ukraine, because there will be a war in Europe. And it's not warmongering, it's factual. Could have done this all morning. Fascinating. Thank you so much indeed. Tobias Elwood, former British Army Colonel Hamish to Bretton-Gordon. Thank you, gang. Really appreciate it.